Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Brad Crabtree. I'm Vice President for Carbon Management at the Great Plains Institute. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and a special thanks to our speakers. We have a great program for you today as we unveil what is the first installment of the Rhodium Group's analysis of the jobs implications of carbon capture and CO2 transport infrastructure deployment in 21 states. This first round of analysis will be followed by results for all 48 states and the nation as a whole in December. We're fortunate to have John Larson of the Rhodium Group with us today to present this initial round of findings. Over the past 2 years, we've heard from state officials and stakeholders across the country that a top priority for them was to have a better understanding of the jobs and economic impacts and how carbon capture would benefit their states and communities in practical, tangible ways. Going beyond just the obvious emissions reduction benefits. It was also identified as a top priority for the Carbon Capture Coalition at the national level. This work is in response to your feedback. The jobs analysis builds on over 2 years of work that GPI coordinated with many federal, state, and private partners to model large-scale regional deployment of carbon capture, CO2 transport infrastructure, and geologic storage. My GPA colleagues, Dane McFarland, will recap this analysis following John's presentation. Dane will be followed by a terrific panel featuring Al Ekblad, head of the Montana AFL-CIO, Kara Fornstrom, chair of the Wyoming Public Service Commission, and Jason Langclow, director of the Louisiana State Energy Office. Now let me introduce John. John Larson is director at the Rhodium Group and leads the firm's U.S. power sector and energy systems research. He is a nationally respected analyst, having worked previously at the Department of Energy and the World Resources Institute. I personally had the privilege of partnering with him on energy and climate policy work over a decade ago when he was at the World Resources Institute. John, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brad, and good morning, everybody. It's great to join you today, and it's great to share the stage with a great set of panelists and practitioners in the carbon capture space, and thanks to the Great Plains Institute for convening everyone today. As Brad said, I'm John Larson. I direct U.S. energy research at the Rhodium Group. We're an independent research firm that does a lot of different work on energy and climate across both the impacts and energy system side of things. And we've been working in the carbon capture space for the last few years, looking at the economics, energy system implications, and economic implications of a variety of carbon capture applications, such as the deployment implications of 45Q analysis we've done very recently, and you can see the deployment estimates we've got, as well as job impacts of that on our website. We've also been working on the techno-economics and potential of direct air capture as a carbon removal option the last few years. And then lately, today, I'm really excited to show you our new analysis looking at the economic impacts of carbon capture deployment in the regional deployment initiative states, and work we've been on top of for the last 6 months or so, and have been really had a great an enjoyable opportunity to engage with Brad and his team, and work again with Brad after so many years looking at this, and we really appreciate Great Plains' support in commissioning this work. So with that, I am going to share my slides, and I should say this work is now public and available on our website at rhg.com live today, and as we'll hear from Dane, we are some of this data is also going to be available through the Regional Deployment Initiative website. I'm working under the assumption everybody can see my screen now, and so first and foremost, this work was done independently by us. It was commissioned by Great Plains, but all of the findings are ours, and ours alone. And I want to thank very briefly my colleagues, Whitney Herndon, Galen Hilbrand, and Ben King, who all really did the heavy lifting and contributed to the number crunching on this. So very quick, what we're going to cover today, there's actually a huge amount of information and data that we've put together. 21 states with a lot of carbon capture opportunities means a lot of information and insights. So this is going to be the Cliff Notes. We're going to very quickly cover the objectives of the work, how we did it, what assumptions we made, provide a kind of high-level overview of our findings at the regional level, and then dive into a few example states just to help people see things in a bit more of a tangible way. We are going to focus on the 3 states that where our esteemed reaction panel represents to give it a finer point. And then I'm going to cover some broader industry-wide highlights and key takeaways. And then the last part of this deck, which I will not go over today, has all of the individual state results. And like I said, all of this will be available on our website. So moving on to objectives and methodology and assumptions. First off, as Brad was saying, carbon capture is a cutting edge technology. It's a key tool in decarbonizing the industrial and electric power sectors. As through all the great work Great Plains has done, they've identified an array of opportunities across the regional deployment initiative states, but it's not very tangible without some real understanding of what this means on an economic basis. And so we are, I think, one of the first to look at this question for at the states with state-specific insights to try and understand what the investment implications and employment impacts, employment benefits of deployment of carbon capture projects in the industrial and electric power sector could be in the near to intermediate term, meaning out through 2035 in the regional deployment initiative states. So this study today is just looking at the states in blue, and the actual locations of these opportunities are all the dots you can see. Forthcoming analysis is going to look at the remaining lower 48 states and then some high-level long-term national analysis. And that will all, as Brad said, be coming out in a couple of months. So looking forward to sharing all that with you folks in the near future. Moving into methods and assumptions, like I said, we're looking at the next 15-year time frame and assuming all of the opportunities that the Great Plains Institute has identified materialize in that time frame. We take Great Plains's carbon capture opportunities within that 15-year period as a given. So we've kind of taken those opportunities straight from them and then assessed the investment and employment benefits associated with those opportunities. We use the in-plan economic model to quantify state-level opportunities in each key industrial and electric power sector. We then quantify the total investment required in each industrial opportunity and what that means for in-state jobs associated with that capital investment. We also then look at annual jobs associated with operating the retrofits, carbon capture retrofits at each facility, and also the jobs associated with any transport infrastructure that needs to get built out in a state to support all that carbon capture. I should say very, very specifically, we are only quantifying the investment and economic benefits associated with the retrofit component of the carbon capture. So, the ongoing jobs in any of these facilities that are currently in place are out of scope. It's just the additional jobs that support the carbon capture activity. As far as facility identification, like I said, we relied on GPI's views for what's in scope for this analysis, and then worked with GPI, Dane and his team, to look at the transport infrastructure build out and what that could mean for both investment and employment. And then we assessed the cost characterizations of each of these opportunities ourselves independently, and then cross-referenced a lot of that with other third-party sources, and then quantified our own range of investment values for each opportunity. So very quickly on like the methods here. First, we quantified the investment costs and O&M costs for each opportunity. We quantified a high and a low value for each opportunity in each sector in each state. because there is definitely some uncertainty around what the investment and employment and O&M requirements will be in any given facility. We then put these costs, these investments and O&M values into in-plan, breaking it out into key separate inputs such as materials and maintenance, and energy, as well as construction and things like that. And then work those through the model and produce state-specific employment and impacts for each individual sector in each state. Jobs in each state associated with investment are things like the purchase and manufacturing of equipment, engineering, construction of a facility, of a carbon capture facility, and then the operation jobs are associated with both running the facility, the carbon capture equipment, as well as any inputs to that carbon capture equipment, like solvent, chemicals, and things like that. Okay, on to the results. So looking across the Regional Deployment Initiative region as a whole, we find that there's over, based on GPI's input, we have over 500 million metric tons of carbon capture opportunities across a variety of different sectors. We've got 8 individual industrial sectors as well as 2 electric power sector sectors. Most of the opportunities are in electric power. That's intuitive in the sense that power plants, in particular coal plants, are very large emitters and large point source emitters, but there's really a diversity of opportunities across key industrial sectors. And when for the results I'm about to show you in a second, we're showing you the economic benefits as far as in-state investment and employment associated with taking advantage of all of these opportunities over the next 15 years. Just looking at the industrial opportunities for a second, we find that there are multi-billion-dollar investment opportunities in each industrial sector across the Regional Deployment Initiative states. For example, there's $2.3 to $3.4 billion in capital investment associated with ethanol. That number rises to as high as $5.6 to $8.4 billion of investment for carbon capture and refineries, $3.8 billion to $5.7 billion in steel, and $4.6 to $6.9 billion in cement, with other opportunities coming in lower, both because of the lower level of opportunities generally, but also in some cases this is relatively affordable carbon capture, and so the investment requirements are lower. And that turns into substantial amounts of good paying jobs. The middle chart here shows you the jobs associated with capital investment, and these are average jobs each year between 2021 and 2035 associated with the investment I just identified. So the actual number in any given year could be higher or lower depending on when these projects get built, but over the 15 years, this is the annual average value in each sector for the region. So for example, if all of the refinery opportunities are pursued, we see 2,230 to 3,350 jobs on average each year would be associated with that investment. And then the job benefits are a little lower in the other sectors. They largely scale with the amount of investment. So for example, in steel, we see 1,190 jobs to 1,780 jobs on average each year over the 15 years. And then cement is similar magnitude, 1,460 to 2,180 on average each year. In the meantime, that's just associated with pursuing the actual retrofit projects. And then on top of that, once all these projects are online, there are annual operation jobs associated with the carbon capture in all of these industrial sectors. So for example, we see another 1,410 to 1,990 jobs created for refineries that would be ongoing after the investment. steel is steel and cement are similar magnitudes, as is ethanol, with lower levels of ongoing jobs in ammonia, gas processing, and petrochemicals. Turning to electric power, we find 70 to $104 billion of capital investment for pursuing all of the opportunities in carbon capture at coal plants in the regional deployment initiative states. This is a very large amount of investment. I'm just going to say that up to 104 billion is a lot of money. And then on the gas power side, we see 31 to $49 billion of investment required to pursue all of these opportunities over the next 15 years. And that turns into very large amounts of jobs. Just pursuing the coal opportunities could mean somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 jobs on average each year for the next 15 years, and pursuing all the coal opportunities, and something like 9,450 to 14,000 jobs in gas power generation. And then on the ongoing job side in these plants, we see each, on average every year, another 12,000 to 19,000 jobs permanent, on an ongoing basis associated with operating the carbon capture equipment at coal plants, and 5,550 to 8,350 associated with gas plants. So that's the high level across the region here. A lot of investment, a lot of jobs, both associated with building these projects and then ongoing after the fact. Very quickly, I'm going to look at Wyoming, Montana, and Louisiana specifically. These states are interesting. Wyoming and Montana are very rural. They don't have a lot of industrial opportunities, but are known for their power sector activity going on here. So you can see here, for example, in Wyoming, there are 5 coal power plant facilities for carbon capture, whereas there's 1 or 2 facilities in the refinery, cement, hydrogen, and gas processing space. We find that in Wyoming alone, if you pursued all of the carbon capture opportunities, that represents $6 to $10 billion in total investment. 1,760 to 2,650 jobs on average over the next 15 years associated with that investment. Another 1,320 to 1,964 ongoing jobs associated with all these projects. And then on top of that, there's another 1.6 billion in investment for transportation infrastructure, and another 620 jobs associated with that transportation investment. You can see here, I'm gonna be mindful of time. I want to make sure I cover everything else here, but this gives you a finer point on the industrial opportunities in Wyoming, and multi-million-dollar investment opportunities in the industrial sector, and the jobs associated with that. And then $6 to $9 billion in total capital investment for coal power carbon capture retrofits, and several thousand jobs associated with that investment, and another 1,000 or so jobs associated with ongoing operation of those carbon capture opportunities. Like I said, Wyoming and Montana look fairly similar in the sense that they do have some industrial opportunities, but they're relatively small compared to a broader industrial state. But the electric power generation opportunities are big. So there's a handful of facilities in the hydrogen, cement, and refinery opportunities here, and then 1 large coal plant with a very large carbon capture opportunity in Montana. If you pursue all these opportunities, we see $2.7 billion of total investment required. That's going to turn into 880 to 1,330 jobs on average per year over the next 15 years associated with that investment, plus another 640 to 940 ongoing jobs to support the projects after the fact, and another nearly $1 billion investment in transport infrastructure, and another 440 jobs associated with that. And you can see how that plays out for in the industrial opportunities, with cement being the highest investment opportunity, available, as well as the highest employment opportunity, and a very large amount of capital investment and jobs associated with carbon capture and coal generation in Montana. Very quickly, turning over to Louisiana, it's a different story. Louisiana is a much bigger industrial state. In fact, if you put industrial emission, Texas and Louisiana together represent 50% of total industrial emissions in America. And you can see here, there's nearly 24 facilities in the industrial sector, plus another almost 10 facilities in the electric power sector in Louisiana that GPI identified as carbon capture targets. If you pursue all of these, that's $8 to $12 billion in new investment in Louisiana. That could lead to 2,710 to 4,060 jobs on average in Louisiana for the next 15 years associated with that investment, and another 1,690 to 2,500 jobs ongoing to support the projects after for operations, and 1.3 billion in transport infrastructure that leads to another 780 jobs on average. You can see here across these industrial opportunities, we see hydrogen and refineries being the biggest investment and job opportunities, but there are other important opportunities as well. And then in the electric power sector, you can see gas power generation in this case is the best opportunity or the largest investment opportunity for Louisiana, leading to the largest amount of jobs, unlike, say, Wyoming and Montana. So moving on to some high-level takeaways and highlights. Looking across the other industrial sectors, the top two carbon capture opportunities we found are Indiana and Michigan. And each one can see at least $1 billion in investment just in steel carbon capture investment, with at least somewhere in the order of 1,000 jobs in Indiana, and more like 280 to 420 in Michigan. And I should just restate, all of this is in detail in every state and later in this deck for people's reference. Looking at ethanol, we see Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska being the biggest opportunities, with several $100 million of investment associated with these across each state, and several hundred jobs. Cement, we found Missouri, Texas, and Michigan are the biggest opportunities, leading to roughly $1 billion to $1.5 billion in investment in most of these states. And then beyond that, lots of what we found basically is that there's a lot of diversity across the rest of the industrial sector as far as what states could lead the way. Louisiana is the best opportunity for ammonia, followed by Iowa and Mississippi, for example, whereas you've got Mountain West states like Colorado and New Mexico leading in gas processing opportunities. The petrochemical industrial complex around Texas and Louisiana is the best opportunities for hydrogen, as with refineries, and then petrochemicals, Texas is the leading opportunity there. So just to wrap up, carbon capture in the Regional Deployment Initiative states represents a multi-billion-dollar investment opportunity, over 124 to 182 billion total capital investment over the next 15 years across all of the opportunities. That investment can lead to 36,000 to 54,200 jobs on average per year for the next 15 years across the region. These carbon capture investments will create a huge amount of good paying jobs across a diversity of industries, including electric power, steel, cement, and ethanol, and refining. And then lastly, carbon capture opportunities play to each state's strengths. There's no like one concentrated area where all of this is going to go in any one, and then like say power generation, and then every state's going to have a huge amount of opportunities there. Every state is good at and leads in some of these sectors, and there's carbon capture and economic opportunities associated with that carbon capture available in each of those states. And so I look forward to the panel and to Dane's discussion. And again, look forward to folks, encourage you to go to our website and download the work and take a deeper look. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, this is Dane McFarland, Director of Research at Great Plains. I have been coordinating the Regional Deployment Initiative analysis over the last few years, and my colleagues Elizabeth Abramson, Lauren Schultz, Kate Sullivan, and Jill Rook at the Great Plains Institute have played key roles in this analysis, as well as our publications on our website. Next slide, please. So the Regional Carbon Capture Deployment Initiative has been working for over 2 years on research and analysis to identify the potential for carbon capture throughout the United States. The goal of this work has been to identify near-term opportunities for carbon capture retrofit in the industrial and power sector, locate areas of long-term, safe, and secure CO2 storage and use, and then work with institutions like Los Alamos National Lab, among others listed on this slide, to model optimized CO2 transport infrastructure that would maximize the amount of CO2 captured and stored each year. We wanted to partner with Rhodium Group to determine the economic impact and potential jobs creation of carbon capture retrofit at this scale. So it was really great to work with an institution like Rhodium, John, Whitney, Galen, and their team to have these studies learn from each other. I think we learned a lot looking at each other's methodologies, looking at the different disciplines, coming in to this really broad scale coordination across research institutions, and then to finally leverage the expertise at Rhodium to really learn about the economic impact and potential for jobs creation. Next slide. So earlier this summer, we published an analytical report that summarized the findings of the Regional Deployment Initiative study. Many of you on this webinar may have seen our presentation earlier this summer in July. So the white paper details our screening methodology that was used to identify the potential retrofit facilities, as well as estimate the potential cost of that retrofit for carbon capture equipment. And then it also details our modeling approach to kind of mapping out regional scale transport infrastructure to bring that CO2 from areas of capture to areas of storage and utilization. One of the key findings outlined in the white paper is that the use of shared regional scale infrastructure is key to achieving maximum capture and storage while minimizing costs, making the most efficient capital investment, as well as protecting environmental impact, minimizing environmental impact, and minimizing land use and vulnerable populations. You can find this report at our website listed here, carboncaptureready.org. Next slide, please. As John mentioned earlier, we also have a range of resources on the Carbon Capture Ready website. As a result of Rhodium's jobs study, we've created a series of state-specific fact sheets that identify the jobs potential creation in each state across different industries and the power sector. We also have a series of fact sheets based on the RDI analysis quantifying the potential for CO2 capture in each state across these industries, and those are also available on that website. So you can find all of that at carboncaptureready.org. So I just wanted to give a quick highlight about where these resources are available online. As John mentioned, the report and the presentation he just gave is available on Rhodium's website as well, and that'll let you go deep into the potential number of jobs created in each industry and in each of these states as well. And we'll provide that at a later time. But I believe it is available today on both websites. So that's it from me. Just wanted to give a little highlight there and thank John and his team for the collaboration. And I think we learned a lot from each other, and it's a really valuable relationship to develop. I'll hand it over now to Patrice Lallam at Great Plains, who will facilitate the panel.
Thanks, Dane, and it is my pleasure today to introduce our reaction panel. Al Ekblad is the Executive Secretary of the Montana State AFL-CIO, and he's been involved with carbon capture and the Regional Deployment Initiative and other activities with GPI for quite a long time. Great to see you today, Al. Kara Fornstrom is also with us. She's the chair of the Wyoming Public Service Commission. Then Governor Meade appointed her to the commission in 2013, and Governor Gordon reappointed her in 2019. And she has done a ton of work in this arena, and recently has been working feverishly on a webinar series on carbon capture in her role with NARUC and the Western Interstate Energy Board. And last but not least, Jason Lanklow, also a close colleague. He is the director of the State Energy Office and also works closely with NASIO and other related organizations. So great to have all three of you with us today. And I think we'll start in order of introduction. And so, Al, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your initial feedback and reaction.
Thank you, Patrice. I also want to thank Great Plains Institute for financing and requesting this study. I find it interesting that we only focused on the direct jobs, which is extremely important, but I think the associated jobs with the development of this infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, is critical to all of our states. In Montana, the blue-collar jobs associated with coal and oil refineries here in Montana are the best-paying jobs in the state. They're all union. They pay over $100,000 a year. Construction in our state around pipelines is also some of the best-paying jobs that are available. So the development of CCS infrastructure is critical to the workers, both in our construction unions and our plants that generate fuel or refine or generate energy or mine coal or refine oil and gas. I think one aspect that I'd like to bring out about what these jobs create is the opportunity to train a future workforce. Here in Montana, the majority of our apprentices, the folks my age that are now masters, they all came through industrial apprenticeships around the construction of refineries, the development of pipelines, and the construction of coal strip 1 through 4. Across the country, we see a shortage of workers in construction. These types of jobs that have, are in place for a significant period of time, they generate the income that families can live on, but they also create the opportunity for people to be trained. The associated jobs that will be maintained, especially in coal strip Montana, is literally the survival of a community. If we don't have capture, that community will literally disappear. And so, you could argue every job in coal strip, whether you're a school teacher, a police officer, a doctor, or you work in the plant, is riding on whether or not capture can be put in place and be affordable within the industry. I think on a broader scope, I do want to talk about that just a little bit, because I don't see how our country comes out of where we are right now economically without some form of industrial resurgence. And given what we know about the environment, given what we know about the political environment we're in, we aren't going to do increased manufacturing. We're not going to have any resurgence in mining or processing. We're not going to have any ability to maintain baseload without the development of carbon capture and sequestration. So I think our country's future is on the line in developing a system where carbon can be either captured and utilized in refining or utilized for products. But overall, the jobs here, I'm going to go back to Montana, the jobs here in Montana, they're critical. I mean, we have workers who come and want apprenticeships all the time, and we can't bring them in because the work isn't available to send them out to it. I think that's a critical thing that people need to remember about apprenticeship, is you don't take them on unless there's work to go to. It's not like sending your kids to school. In apprenticeship, you're sending them to work with training, and they're going to make a living. And so I find everything that we've heard today extremely exciting. I hope that we can find the political will in this country to move it forward. And Patrice, that's pretty much my comments.
Thanks, Al, much appreciated. And we'll, just a reminder to everyone participating in the webinar today that we have the chat function available. If you have questions that are coming to mind as you're listening to our reaction panel, feel free to type them in. We have GPI staff that will be monitoring those, and then hopefully have time for some questions in just a little bit. I'd like to turn it over to Kara Fornstrom now for her reaction.
Thanks, Patrice, and thanks to Great Plains for the invitation today. I appreciate very much the work done by Great Plains and the Rhodium Group on this important subject. Obviously, the state of Wyoming is very affected by this because we are the largest coal producer in the country, producing about 40% of the coal in this country that goes to 29 states. We also have a large coal fleet, and we export 2/3 of that electricity to other states. Everyone's aware of the pressures on coal, natural gas prices, national state energy policy, and that's obviously spurred Wyoming's interest in carbon capture technologies, which really started in earnest with Governor Mead's administration and has been carried on by Governor Gordon's administration. This report is important to us for a few reasons, and I just want to walk through a couple of the summary that was provided in this report and how it assists the state of Wyoming. Tables 4 and 5 show the coal plants represent 53.8% of the share of 45Q eligible facility emissions and 40.1% share of the total capturable estimate, respectively, which is the highest percentage in either one of those tables. Table 3 shows that of the 336 coal plants make up 45% of the share of US stationary carbon dioxide emissions. And then you look at these other figures that demonstrate specific availability or ability of the state of Wyoming to capitalize on these things. Figure 8 demonstrates the proximity in Wyoming between emitting facilities and enhanced oil recovery fields with potential CO2 demand. Figure 13 shows almost the entire state of Wyoming is covered in green, meaning that there's a very low storage cost. And in fact, Table 7 shows Wyoming trails Texas and barely behind my friend Jason's state, Louisiana, in its storage potential. Obviously, the report's findings on the cost of capture and the findings of job developments and general economic benefits also demonstrate that the state of Wyoming has a great deal of interest in pursuing these technologies. I'd like to talk a little bit about where Wyoming is on CCUS at this point. We've long been a leader on legal framework, technology, both for utilization technologies at the Integrated Test Center and also for sequestration technologies as a carbon safe DOE project award winner. And we've also led on CO2 pipeline corridors. And what I describe as sort of the missing piece is the regulatory innovation. And I wanted to talk briefly about the Wyoming legislature's recent focus on regulatory innovation in passing what we call House Bill 200 in this legislative session. And its purpose is to incentivize utilities to participate in carbon capture projects at their coal plants. The title of the bill now in statute is Reliable and Dispatchable Low Carbon Energy Standard. And that bill resulted in 2 statutes, one 3718-101, which provides some definitions that are important for the other statute, which is 3718-102. And the significant portions of that are the establishment of energy generation portfolio standards, taking into account low carbon dispatchable, which is coal-based. It does include some very interesting rate recovery and limitations that advances regulatory innovation, and then contains some reporting requirements for the Commission. In the statute, it specifically defines what carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology is, what dispatchable means, what low carbon means, and what reliable means. There are some other terms within the rules that we believe will need additional definitions to assist parties in understanding what the statute means. One of those terms is power quality. So we're not just looking at reliable, but we're also looking at voltage issues and other things to ensure that customers are receiving reliable electricity. Also, the statute turns on the definition of intermittent or intermittent availability and on incremental costs. So in setting the energy generation portfolio standards, the Commission has been tasked with the requirement to establish energy portfolio standards that maximize the use of dispatchable and reliable low carbon electricity. It requires each utility to generate a specified percentage of electricity with carbon capture technology. It establishes the date to achieve that as no later than July 1st, 2030, gives the Commission the authority to set intermediate standards, and probably most importantly from my perspective, requires utilities to demonstrate carbon capture opportunities in their IRP. And for all of those familiar with the regulatory process, if a project is not in the IRP, it cannot be in the action plan and would not get constructed. So we think that's very important. It's also significant that unlike other clean energy bills across the country, this does not set a standard, a specific standard within the statute. Instead, it gives that discretion to the Commission to set it for each utility based on their individual set of circumstances on realistic retrofits of their coal plants. The other really significant portion of this bill relates to the rate recovery and limitations. It was a specific policy nod to the utilities and direction to the Public Service Commission. We do not read this statute as precluding the Commission's traditional prudency review for inclusion of these projects in rate base. But it does provide the PSC with additional tools to incentivize and financially reward utilities for pursuing carbon capture projects. But it definitely expands our innovative rate-making authority in a few ways. One, it allows us to authorize a higher ROE for utilities, the piece of the project that actually would go into rate base. It also includes a significant concept called integral to or adjacent to. And the integral to would be related to a traditional project where the utility would pursue the project with ratepayer dollars and put that investment into rate base and then be earning a return. But the adjacent to directs utilities to partner with third parties that they could construct the carbon capture project, and there would be no ratepayer dollars involved at all. If that were to be the case, the second part of the innovative rate-making component is it allows the Commission to approve a sharing band with shareholders for CO2 sale revenue, for example, or perhaps their piece of the EOR project. And in that case, if it's an adjacent to project where a third party is investing the dollars necessary to construct the project, this would actually represent a decrease to rates because it would be offset by CO2 sales revenue. There's also a rate recovery mechanism on incremental costs that allow the Commission to put into place a surcharge on customers' bills in advance of the project. They could start collecting that money in advance. This, as it went through the legislative process, became a way to protect ratepayers, and so that limitation was set at 2% of customer bills can be collected to go towards these carbon capture projects for whatever piece the utility may be investing in that. It also includes utility protections, which says if the 2% is insufficient to meet the incremental costs associated with the carbon capture project, the Commission can allow recovery of those prudently incurred costs. Just in finishing up on House Bill 200, the hammer in the bill actually refers back to an earlier bill passed a couple of sessions ago, which was Senate File 159. And basically what that says, if the utility is not complying with the statute, not meeting its portfolio standards, the commission has the ability to prevent cost recovery of any replacement generation for those coal plants that have been retired. It also directs the commission to promulgate rules to implement this statute and gives reporting requirements to the commission to keep the legislature informed of the efforts and the success of this legislation. So next steps, we have already initiated our inclusive stakeholder process. We'll be having our first meeting on that in the afternoon of November 12th. We've asked parties to help us with the definitions in the statute because we think it's important that we all start with the same framework of the terms that we'll be talking about. And then we'll have a separate stakeholder meeting, technical conference to discuss the other significant portions of the bill and what parties think the commission needs to adopt in terms of rules to help us implement this rule. Maybe most significantly, our largest utility will be submitting their next IRP in April of 2021. And because of this statute, it is now a matter of state law that Rocky Mountain Power will have to analyze and address the ability for them to retrofit some of their coal plants with carbon capture. And so we're hoping that assists the utilities in planning for what we think is an important technology going forward. Again, thank you for the opportunity to participate, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this today or offline about this innovative legislation that we're pursuing in Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara, for that. Appreciate it. Jason, how about over to you?
Good morning, Patrice. I want to start by just thanking the Great Plains Institute and all the staff, and also Rhodium for putting this together. I think that the timing could not be better in terms of looking at jobs. And what I'd like to do today, just in terms of what I saw from John, and obviously just going through the report, it's very exciting to see any kind of job numbers, especially when it's matched with what our industries are in terms of manufacturing or gas processing. And that helps us tremendously. And I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important and just kind of some of the challenges that Louisiana is facing. And the reason I'd like to do that is just because the timing of this particular panel is absolutely wonderful, because last week we were on a call with a lot of states through NASIO, and there was an economic development panel on impacts of COVID and things that states are doing to look at opportunities and to move forward, et cetera. So I think that this panel, all this does is help us to have some of those difficult conversations with legislators, and really to give them a sense of positivity that there are industries and that there are other opportunities out there for us to be looking at. So just to kind of set the stage, I think that John did a tremendous job, and Al and Kara as well, just to kind of pave the way for the state discussion. For us, we've had our own set of challenges, as I'm sure many of you are aware. The biggest challenges that we've had is just from a revenue standpoint in terms of economic impacts for COVID. Louisiana has averaged close to about 170,000 cases. So that's had a significant impact on the economy. We are an oil and gas producing state where we rely very much on industry and on tax structure for our production. A large portion of our operating budget is based on severance taxes and other collections. So that's dealt a very difficult punch. When you factor in that we've had two significant hurricanes that have decimated Western Louisiana, where there's refining and petrochemical production and manufacturing, that's another very difficult thing. And we're seeing somewhere in the estimate just before this last Hurricane Delta that we were in the neighborhood of about 1.4 billion. So those are significant challenges. And when you look at how we operate and manage the budget for the state, oil and gas and our manufacturing corridor, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, is essential to that long-term success. So one of the reasons that we started looking into carbon capture very early on was that we fully recognized that this particular technology could potentially help a lot of the current industries that we already have in the state. And as John mentioned, Louisiana and Texas account for about 50% of the industrial emissions in the United States. We have a huge industrial corridor. We have very high purity sources of CO2. We have the infrastructure in place, and like Wyoming and Montana and some of these other states, we're trying to put all those pieces together. And that's happened a lot because of the work that this group has been doing on the federal level from a policy standpoint. But we've been trying to do a lot of work at the state level on the regulatory side to make sure that we're ready for any and all projects that potentially could come to Louisiana. So one of the biggest challenges that I think that we all face is that when you go and you have that limited snapshot of time with a legislator or with another political party who's responsible for budget, their attention span is not always, you don't always have a lot of time. And one of the things that we recognized very early on is that when we talked about carbon capture and some of the presentations that we've done, jobs and economic impacts always came up. There were always questions on, what does this mean? Why should we be looking at this? Why is this an important policy decision? And really and truly, the thing that helped us to get to where we are now in terms of trying to implement projects is a lot of the early modeling that Dane and Los Alamos and all these other folks put together. It helped us to have maps, to have a lot of the detailed information, to be able to go and sit with people to illustrate to them that this is something that we needed to pay attention to, that it was important, that it could be a tremendous opportunity from an economic impact. So phase 2 of this, what I call phase 2, the jobs focus, has become even more important. And when you look at what the potential can have for the state, we're all facing severe economic challenges. But I think the key thing for us is being able to work with industry and to illustrate to them that there are opportunities later on, and that we need to work together to try to get together a lot of these regional partnerships, working with other states and looking for those opportunities for a significant project investment. And as Al and Kara mentioned, this particular piece of it, and the carbon capture piece, is essential for us to be able to continue to operate and to continue for us to be able to supply jobs. And again, those all factor in significantly with policymakers. And what we're trying to do, what we've noticed as we've progressed through this, is that the state of Louisiana and others, we've had a very renewed interest on resiliency, on long-term resiliency. That term has become very important. And when you're a state that's a coastal state that gets hit by storms a lot, and granted, everybody has their share of disasters, but it's renewed our focus on coastal Louisiana and on resilience. And the reason that that's so important, and the reason I mention it today, is that this overall effort on carbon capture and energy planning and fuel diversity and looking at how we're going to supply power and energy to our communities for the next 15 to 20 years has forced us to look at a lot of different technologies. And we 100% feel that carbon capture, utilization, and storage is going to be a critical piece for how we move forward. So again, when you look at how important it is to be able to talk about jobs, to be able to talk about how this is going to affect our communities, we need studies like this to be able to have those very difficult conversations and to have those conversations with our planners at both the state and at the federal level. So I think that studies like this are absolutely critical. The numbers that we're seeing come across are essential for us to be able to have those conversations. And again, I can't speak enough for the hard work that's going into this, because I think that the jobs piece is going to continue to be one of the most important things that we talk about in the coming weeks, months, and years. So I will mention today that we had some exciting news in the midst of all the economic stuff that's happening. We had a group of private family investment that announced one of the largest sequestration projects in Western Louisiana. This is a privately owned facility that is looking at permitting up to 3 million tons per year on private land in Western Louisiana. I'm sure they're working with a lot of industrial partners in that area. And what we often say when we talk about with our friends in Oklahoma and across the US, we're saying that in order for us to be able to have these conversations about jobs and economies and the effects and economic impacts of carbon capture, the only way that we can do that is with projects, right? So we've been working very hard to work on the regulatory standpoint, because we've often said to get through Class 6, to get through the economic impacts, we need to understand how these projects work. We need to have lessons learned. And so I think that the focus of GPI and on Rhodium on jobs is going to be critical in doing this, because the more projects that we can go through and the more regulatory permits that we can push through, I think the better it's going to set the stage for us to be able to continue investments and have those conversations with companies. So again, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that's going into producing these documents. The states that were on the call today have been working diligently, just like we have, to try to make carbon capture a priority. And I'd encourage all of you to continue to pursue this jobs impact, because I think it's going to help you very much in those conversations that you'll have with your legislators and policymakers. So thanks again for having us today, and look forward to talking to you guys later on.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to Kara and Al as well for those thoughtful reactions to this work. John Larson, the first question I think in the queue is going to be for you. I just want to remind everyone that this is the first phase of 3 phases of work that Rhodium is completing. They will be producing state level data and information on the remaining states lower in the lower 48, and then also a national look at job opportunities and economic impact with respect to carbon capture. So John, the first question here has to do with IMPLAN and whether or not you cross-checked job estimates with actual CCS projects. So that's the first question.
Sure, thanks for the question. So we did look at, there's a few different ways to cross-check here, right? One is to look at other studies of carbon capture opportunities and job impacts that have been done by others, and the U.S. Energy Association did a piece of work last year. Our numbers are roughly in the same ballpark as that, and I know I see in the chat that there's a reference specifically to Petronova, and you know, I'm not sure if those developers have published exact job numbers yet in that space, but I think our investment values are in the same range for a coal power plant retrofit project. But I would say I wouldn't go further to compare our the Petronova numbers to say industrial facility opportunities, because the cost profiles are very and opportunities are very different, as folks on this call would know. The purity streams, things like that, for CO2 are very different.
Thanks, John. Another question for you is whether or not you've looked at the possibilities for direct air capture.
It's a great question. So for this and for the forthcoming analysis in this series with the Great Plains Institute, we worked with Dane and his team and used the carbon capture opportunities they've identified for the industrial and electric power sectors, and that's all existing facilities. So direct air capture is a little different. We don't have any existing direct air capture facilities yet, so it's kind of a different approach that needs to be done. We have not done kind of optimal locational assessments of where DAC would make the most economic sense, either in the regional deployment initiative states or anywhere else. But I would say turn folks' attention to work done by Jen Wilcox and others that has looked at kind of the best opportunities in the near term for DAC deployment. And I think they found some really opportunities in some of these very states we looked at here, where, as you know, basically as long as you have access to affordable low carbon energy, as well as geologic storage sites or EOR sites, you're pretty much good to go, absent finding, you know, additional policy support. But like as far as the basic building blocks and ingredients, that's what you need.
Thanks, John. Kara, there's a question for you relating to House Bill 200. Wondering if it is still in the legislative process or if it is in fact state law in Wyoming.
Thanks for the question. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that. The legislature did pass that in this session in 2020. The governor signed it. It became effective on July 1st of 2020.
Thanks, Kara. I'm not seeing additional questions in the queue. I would like to remind everyone that all of the information, the slide deck that John presented today, along with state level fact sheets on the job and economic opportunities within the RDI region, are available on our website, carboncaptureready.org. Rhodium Group also has a page up on their website with a link to John's presentation and other information. We will be also sending out an email to everyone who registered for this webinar with the webinar recording and links to that specific information. If there are no other questions in the queue, I really want to thank John and his team for all of their work in this first phase of the job study work, and to our esteemed panelists for their reactions today, and to all of you for attending. With that, enjoy your day. Thank you very much.